Duke Nukem 3D touched down on PCs in 1996 and was a huge hit for 3D Realms right out the gate. The game is a blend of FPS chaos, witty voice work, and a level of interactivity with the environment that made the world feel real. Of course, it wasn't long before people wanted to take that experience to the home consoles. This led to a number of interesting, quirky, and sometimes bizarre ports. But to me, perhaps the most curious of all these 1990s Duke Nukem 3D ports was the one that landed on Sega's ill-fated Saturn console. Arriving in 1997 and published by Sega themselves, the game was developed by Lobotomy Software. It ditches the build engine in favour of Lobotomy's own engine called Slave Driver, the same engine that powered Quake on Sega Saturn. This doesn't mean they cut out all the good parts of Duke Nukem 3D though, far from it. The Sega Saturn port boasts 30 levels, an almost complete roster of enemies, and features taken straight from the PC version, including environmental interactions and an inventory of items to help the player out. You can still destroy items like toilets and various props throughout the world, and if you like destroying the toilets in Duke Nukem 3D, there's a secret level for you here. It also features a multiplayer mode, although you need to be linked up to Sega Saturn Netlink to see this in the main menu. But of course, with a game as intense as Duke Nukem 3D, cutbacks had to be made to get the game running on Saturn in the first place. The levels have either all been recreated or converted over from the build engine versions, heavily modified and simplified at points to help with performance. Some of the game's larger levels like Toxic Dump, Fusion Station and Darkside have all been cut into two separate levels. Crouching is no longer done by the player but done automatically by the game when needed. You'll also notice a fair few differences in the behaviour of Duke and the enemies that you fight. Enemy behaviour isn't quite the same as the PC version, and some of Duke's weapons are notably slower at firing. Interestingly though, this version has a much stronger lighting aesthetic. Coloured lighting is very prominent, and the lighting overall is more interesting than the other versions when it's utilised. I'd argue though the biggest issue with this version is the controls. Duke doesn't handle quite the same as his PC counterpart, slipping more easily on ledges and wobbling side to side in this bizarre motion when you turn. It also needs to be said that controlling the jetpack and swimming in deep water is an absolute pain. You can reconfigure the control layout to match your desires, but it's a steep learning curve. Speaking of items, the easiest way to activate them is to go into the main menu, which is somewhat cumbersome every time you want to use an item. The music's also been brought over from Duke Nukem 3D. Some of the tracks are well done, others haven't made the conversion quite as well. Duke's voice lines are also of a lower quality, and this is kind of noticeable when he starts talking a lot. Overall, it's a creative if slightly odd interpretation of Duke Nukem 3D, but one which stands on its own, even if Duke is swaying side to side while standing. So what we're going to do here, we're going to dive into some Duke Nukem 3D on the Sega Saturn.
Those alien bastards are gonna pay for shooting up my ride.
The first thing you'll probably notice here is that as we turn Duke around here, he's sort of bobbling his head. It's kind of like he's doing a little jig. It's very weird and it takes a bit of getting used to. You'll also notice that this is a very faithful recreation of the first level of Duke Nukem 3D. However, it is not exactly the same, and things will begin changing as we progress through the level. But in this version you can jump, you can collect items, you can blow up walls like that, but remember this is not running on the build engine. It's important to keep that in mind because as we're exploring these levels, you're going to see a lot of odd things happening, and a lot of them can be explained away by simply saying this is not the same Duke Nukem that you know from PC. But it does a good job of trying to replicate that experience. So we'll take down the alien there, grab the rockets. There is a secret behind here, and it is still the steroids. We can interact with items, so we can have a look at the CCTV cameras. A very important part of Duke Nukem 3D. We'll head outside here and grab the atomic health over here. That should spawn enemies in. We are playing on the second difficulty here. If you play on the higher difficulties, it gets a bit tougher. Like, it gets a lot tougher, and with the controls in this one, fighting the controls and fighting against hordes of enemies, it gets a bit much. You can still blow up walls, as you can see there. We have opened an entryway into the cinema here. It's worth noting that the way doors work in this version is very different. There aren't any swinging doors like in Duke Nukem 3D on PC. Instead, you have doors that kind of open in all kinds of directions, like that, so they kind of pull apart. Sometimes they'll go top to bottom. It's definitely an interesting little change. But you can see that this is a very nice approximation of this area. You know exactly where we are, and that says enough about the level of detail that this invokes. And you can interact with the items, so you can turn the lights on and off if you really want to. I'm going to grab the shotgun here. So I will point out the shotgun is quite a bit slower to fire in this version. If you hold the firing button down, it takes a good extra sort of second for the gun to shoot once you've finished firing, and it does make it a bit more unreliable in this version. You can also see on the wall there some texture warping going on. This version of Duke Nukem does have like a very, very big texture warping issue. Unfortunately, I can't find the lift there. That is one of the changes that I was discussing earlier on. Looks like we're going to have to use the jetpack to get the armor up there. And yes, we can still shoot the fire hydrants and drink from the fire hydrants if we so choose. We'll head inside here. You can see that they've got rid of a few doors here as well, so we head straight inside the cinema. There's no doors blocking our way in there. See if I can hit that enemy in the window up here. You can look up and down, although it isn't free look, you have to press a button. It also means that you have to be a bit more precise in when you want a rocket to sort of go where you want to, because it's a lot harder for the rockets to lock on in this version. At least that's from my experience so far. We're going to head back down here. We were just here a moment ago, but you can see that there are still sort of environmental things happening, earthquakes. Not as prominent in this version, but they definitely are still here. You can also see they got rid of the doors on the toilet there. You can still shoot the toilets. It should be noted that there is actually a reward in this version for shooting all the toilets in the game. I'm going to take down the aliens in this room. I'm pretty sure there is a way to use the items without having to go into the menu, but this seems to be the easiest way to use an item that you want to use. You have to press start and head in. It's a bit cumbersome. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I guess you have to make do with what you've got. What I'm going to do here, I'm just going to let you enjoy the ambience of the music and the enemy fire here. There are notable changes like this throughout all the levels. None of these levels are one-to-one recreations of the original versions of them, and that means that even if you played a lot of Duke Nukem, you're going to be seeing changes here, there and everywhere. So this is probably going to be a good time to talk about flying. Using the jetpack in this is something of an annoyance. You have to make use of the strafing buttons to go up and down, as well as holding the jump button. It is not comfortable at all, let me tell you. You'll also start to notice the differences when you sort of explore a lot of the secret areas, because it seems that one of the biggest casualties of these levels getting made smaller is a lot of the secret areas have been diminished or removed entirely. So if you like secret hunting in Duke Nukem 3D, you might find yourself a bit disappointed with this one. We're going to head up here. I hope that there's an apartment here. I can't remember if there's an apartment here or not in this version. We'll head up. And inside the apartment, yes there is. So the apartment is still very much here. One thing I will say, the lighting in this version, like I mentioned in the opening part of this video, it seems a lot more intense in this version. And there are other colours of lights that it likes to kind of throw out there as well. So I kind of feel that the lighting in this version is definitely a plus. But I want to show you the arcade area because obviously this is pretty iconic in the original opening level here. Take care of these enemies. You can see that the explosion wasn't so much of an explosion as just a little bang in the corner there. Although the arcade cabinet there does still open up the wall. It's important to keep context as well. This was released a year after Duke Nukem landed on the PC, and Duke Nukem 3D was a very, very intense game for its time. It was doing a lot of things that I think a lot of first-person shooters at the time didn't really think were that important, because for me, Duke Nukem 3D, one of the things that really always impressed me was just how interactive the world was. It wasn't just a case of being dropped into a world like Doom's levels were. You could actually interact with the light switches, you could blow up walls, you could make things easier for yourself if you knew where to look, and I really, really appreciate that about Duke Nukem 3D. Bringing that experience to Sega Saturn in 1997 was a very big accomplishment. Now, whether you like the way that they did it or not, that is completely up to you, but for me, just seeing this running in any form on console in 1997 to this level, I think it's very much worthy of praise. But you can see there, for example, at the start of the level, we don't actually ride down the elevator. But one thing they have added is those buildings back there. So interestingly, for some reason, they've decided to add buildings in there. I assume it's to make the level look a lot bigger than it actually is, like there's more going on. I don't think there's any secrets or anything in those buildings. I think they're just there for aesthetic reasons. But you can kind of see that the level has a bit more of a cramped feel to it. Everything feels that much smaller, and it doesn't feel quite as expansive as it does in the PC original. And one of the reasons for that is because when they were recreating these levels, they kind of made everything a bit smaller. So for example, the roof, for example, of these levels usually is lower. It's all to try and help performance, because there are times when the performance of this version doesn't do so well. We're going to head inside the comic book store here. Well, not the adult comic book store, but I'm going to use the pipe bombs here to get rid of the enemies in bulk. One thing that always makes me laugh when I come into this here, look how tall this bookcase feels in this version. It really, really does feel a lot bigger. It should also be noted that Duke Nukem's voice lines, they all have this sort of lower quality feel to them. That's to be expected, obviously, because compression to get it working on the console. We do get reflections in the mirrors though, so it's not like we've lost a lot. A lot of the tricks that were used with Duke Nukem 3D still stand, and yes, you can still drink the toilet water if you really, really want to. But you can also see when we're kind of browsing against the shelf there, the textures start warping. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just let you kind of enjoy the ambience of the next little bit, because there's a bit of action coming up and it'll be good for you to just sort of hear the music. The other thing that I kind of appreciate here as well is that even though, like for example, this area here, they don't let you blow the lid off the manhole cover, but they do actually take it off for you. So they are making things as easy as they can for the player to discover. Although if you've been in this sewer section, you'll already know that they've kind of changed the layout a little bit of it. Let's try that again. The music in this version, I really like it actually. Across the board, I think that for the most part, the music's pretty spot on from what I've experienced, and listening to the OST on YouTube, I've actually been really enjoying the soundtrack. It's very, very high quality. It's a lot like the PlayStation 1 version of the soundtrack for me in that I think it's just as good as the original. I think the interpretation they go for is actually pretty solid. Obviously, some of the tracks aren't as solid as the others, but then you also have to remember that in the N64 version, you got no music, so it's better to have something than nothing, in my opinion. Grab the rockets there. The texture warping issues for me become a bit of a problem when you're kind of in really enclosed spaces, because the walls sort of feel like they're melting around you, and it creates this kind of psychedelic feeling. Unfortunately, this does not have the scale of the Nintendo 64 levels. If you saw my playthrough of Duke Nukem 3D, you'll know that some of these levels get greatly expanded on, and this is one of those levels. But you can see the bar, it's still here.
Shake it, baby. Shake
And we
it,
can
baby.
still give the lady money, but when we shoot her, nothing really happens on this difficulty. We also can't crouch in this version of the game. The crouching is basically like one of those auto functions. As soon as you come up to a space where you can crouch, Duke will just sort of make it happen. I think it's interesting, and obviously it's probably been done because of the limitations of the controller. But when I open this door here, I just want you to admire the full-on assault of colours that awaits us in here. I know that in the PC original there are some colours as well, but they're not as vivid as this. I can definitely tell you that much. And then you saw though, when the pig cop shot, it sort of flashed against the wall. It just looks beautiful in my opinion. And coloured lighting, when it's used very effectively, can really help to add to a level's aura. And I feel that with Doom on PlayStation 1 and in this version of Duke Nukem, they really get it right. Going to throw a pipe bomb out there. We want to get rid of that pig cop up there. So we're going to get ambushed by all these pig cops here. Once you get used to the controls, they aren't that much of a handicap. The problem is that there's such a sort of steep learning curve when it comes to the controls that I can imagine a lot of people just will not bother. I think it really helps as well that you can customize your controls in this version of Duke Nukem. So if you're finding things a bit difficult with the way things are set up, you can at least play around and try to get something that works better for you. Excuse me. We're gonna head up here. We could have jetpacked all the way up here. And again, one thing I really like about Duke Nukem's level design is that if you have the right item and you bring it with you into a future level, you can make that level so much easier. It's all about being strategic in Duke Nukem 3D. That secret is still there. I'm going to be curious how they handle this upcoming end of level here, because if you don't remember, when we head inside the area here, we're going to get ambushed and trapped here. Okay, so we are going to be kicked to the next level. I always find the first two levels of Duke Nukem 3D to be one of the best combo of opening levels in any of these first-person shooters. I think it really sets the tone, and any console version has to capture that, I feel, if it's to be successful, because the first two levels of Duke Nukem 3D are really, really strong, and Death Row, unfortunately for me, is not quite as strong. But we have lost all our weapons here, so that's actually pretty cool. We're keeping up with the continuity of the PC version. I'm not a fan of the fact that that took a few extra kicks. You'll have noticed there as well, we cannot shoot these switches. No, in this version you have to press them, which is a bit of a shame, because obviously shooting switches in Duke Nukem 3D is something that you can do, and it can make things a lot easier. I'm going to grab the shotgun here. So if you play the Nintendo 64 version of this level, you'll know there's actually a big bit here that sort of adds to the opening of this level, but it's obviously not here. I wonder if our Doom Marine is behind those stained glasses there. Okay, how am I meant to get up here? Let's have a look. Right, so there isn't a switch here on this version, at least not from what I can see. If I'm being silly and missing it, then I apologize. Okay, you're supposed to hit that switch when you shoot the glass here. I don't want to die here, so let's use the portable medkit. If I shoot this one, is there a switch? You'd expect there to be some kind of switch here. This is where you normally hit it. Do we have... Oh, okay, you just have to open the door directly.
That's one doomed Space Marine.
So another thing I've noticed about the voice clips in this version, some of them seem to be really sped up. Like, for example, Duke there just literally got that out as fast as he could. I don't know if that's like something that was done intentionally or not, but it feels like some of the voice clips do come back a bit quicker than they're supposed to. Well, I guess we're not getting those right now. So I just want to show off the steroids here. I don't really make use of the steroids when playing Duke Nukem 3D, but they are here and you can make use of them. I really like that they brought as many of the items over as they could. A big part of Duke Nukem 3D's appeal is the fact that you can make use of the items. Oh, we got a jetpack here. So you'll notice as well that door is just a normal sliding door. It's not like the chain door that you normally see in that spot. So I guess that's how we're meant to do that. One other thing you'll notice when playing through this version is that anything that spins in the original PC version does not spin in this version. So you can see here these turbines don't actually spin, and it kind of removes a lot of the difficulty of this area, but I'm still going to be very careful because I would rather not die here.
Hail to the king, baby.
Yeah, some of those voice lines, they do feel quite sped up. I'm not sure if that's just the way that, you know, I'm playing it's causing that or not, but it is something to observe. So I'm not quite sure why that door chooses to open in that way. That is a very odd way for the door to choose to open. But one thing we can do here is we don't actually have to go outside because we still have the jetpack that we've just picked up. Normally you don't get the jetpack in the first part of this level, but here you can see that yes, we have. So it means we can actually come up here and... Wow, I really lost a lot of health there. that was a bit of a stupid move from me. I'm going to jump ahead to the end of the level here because I just want to sort of show off some of the limitations of this version here. If you look at the water texture there, that is quite the blurry texture. I don't know if I like that. That seems very out of place. Of course, I've got the night vision goggles active here. I do find they're really useful for picking out enemies in the distance. And the fun thing is, because we didn't actually head outside earlier on, I was actually able to skip most of the level. We can just head outside and actually grab the key card that we were supposed to grab like a lot earlier in the level. Again, very brave of the game to give a jetpack at the start of this level, because it basically encourages people to skip most of the level. But overall, the level is as faithful as I think you can get in this engine. So either they've moved that or it's just not there anymore. But we're going to head to the submarine over here, and we're going to come up to one of my other big bugbears with this version, and that is the swimming. It's the exact same controls as the jetpack, and it is pretty nasty to use. Now, I've got the strafe buttons set to the shoulder buttons here, so it's not that bad. I can sort of control a bit more clearly what I want to do, but I can imagine on a real controller it's going to be a bit of a nightmare. You can see they've got rid of the reactor room there, so we're just going to escape this level and we're going to head to the final level here. I do think overall this is a very, very solid package, and I think that in particular when you look at the hardware that this was targeting, it's definitely a very, very competent attempt to make Duke Nukem work on hardware that I would argue probably wasn't designed for it. It's never going to match up to the PC original, because obviously that was where Duke Nukem was intended for. But if you ended up playing this version, I don't really think you'd have that much to complain about, other than the awful controls. Then again though, I would say that the N64 and PS1 didn't have great controls either. Both those versions plagued by control issues, so I think it's just a fact that there's a lot of things that need controlling in Duke Nukem, and there's only so many buttons on these controllers. So unfortunately something kind of has to give, and in this version you lose the ability to crouch, and swimming around and flying around becomes a bit of a pain in the backside. For the final part of this playthrough though, I'm going to show you what the final level looks like, because I'm going to guess that a lot of people have never actually got this far, and immediately I'll just let you listen to the music for a second. It is an interesting facet of this version that the music can go from really, really close to the PC version to doing its own thing entirely, and it does add to the charm of the experience, I'm not gonna lie. This music does not go with this encounter at all, but you know, it is what it is in my opinion. It's kind of funny to me that the LA skyline has just completely disappeared here, and it's just a starry night. It kind of implies that this stadium is just floating through space and we're just fighting this enemy here in the middle of space, which would be quite a twist on what actually happens. I appreciate the fact as well that they brought all the guns forward, even if not all the guns behave the way that they should behave in my opinion. And that's the boss killed. But yeah, I honestly don't hate this version of Duke Nukem 3D. I think it's a bit quirky, and I think it's got a lot of differences that will put some people off. But let me know what you think of Sega Saturn Duke Nukem 3D. Have you ever played this? Did you enjoy it? Would you play this if you were given the chance? Or do you think that this is just a big hot mess? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching.